The game Girls Corps is where players train girls, with most of the characters being female. The game quickly gained popularity, drawing millions of players with frequent releases of new gacha pulls. Heihachi, the protagonist, is one of its big spenders. Late at night, he sits at his desk. With money already running thin, he scrolls through online comments. His focus stays fixed on the new character Luna. Holding his card tightly, he decides to spend it all on her. When he prepares to purchase the chest, he shouts her name as he pulls the gacha. A chest appears, the glow indicating a guaranteed ultra-rare item inside. His excitement surges as he hopes it finally contains Luna. The chest opens, but instead of Luna, it reveals a scroll titled, "Invitation Letter to Another World." His excitement dies as quickly as it came. He steadies himself and decides to open the remaining chests. Coming back to the invitation, Heihachi clicks to read its details. The description claims it transfers the user to another world. He searches online for information and finds nothing, wondering if it might be a pass to a global server. He presses yes, and in an instant, a bright flash swallows him. When it clears up, Heihachi finds himself barefoot on open, grassy land, staring forward into the vast plain. Sitting down on the grass, he pinches himself. The pain confirms he's not dreaming. He panics briefly, then forces himself to calm down. Heihachi decides his first goal should be finding shelter. This would protect him against any wild animal attack. But, as he soon finds out, those are the least of his worries. A loud cry rings out behind him, making his whole body freeze in terror. As he turns around, he sees a hideous goblin ready to attack him. Shock holds him for only a moment before he bolts in terror, screaming as he runs barefoot across the field. The goblin rages below as he scrambles up to a tree. Unable to climb the tree, the goblin eventually gives up and runs away. Although he managed to escape, Heihachi is left wondering what's going on. The thought of the invitation to another world comes back to him. He fumbles through his clothes for his phone. The home menu will not appear, but he can still access Girls Corps. On checking, he finds something unbelievable. His stats show him at level 1 with no items. Heihachi explodes in a rage, nearly smashing his phone on the ground. But he quickly calms himself, realizing his phone is his only clue and he cannot afford to lose it. His eyes light up as he looks at the screen, showing a guaranteed UR pull for first-time users. He draws and a book materializes in his hands labeled, "The Book of Languages." It's an item that never existed in Girls Corps. The description reads, "A book that can help the user understand the language of this world, but it causes headaches as a side effect." Holding it curiously, he wonders how to use it when suddenly a sharp pain surges through his head. Afterwards, he steadies himself with another thought. If items can materialize, then units might as well. His screen asks if he wishes to summon Norl Fanya. Heihachi presses yes as light bursts from the phone, shaping armor and long hair into a figure forming in front of him. The armored girl Norl appears. She begins to speak but suddenly drops from the tree, crashing to the ground. Heihachi looks down, realizing his mistake too late. Pouting, she calls him a meanie. He apologizes profusely, and lucky for him, she forgives him. Heihachi hesitantly introduces himself as she brushes herself off. Norl tells him to complete his tutorial because things will soon get busy and he must understand them. Suddenly, a group of goblins appear, charging toward them. It seems the goblin from earlier brought some friends. Heihachi panics, but Norl instructs him to open his item tab on the phone and select what he wants from the list. He does so, and armor instantly covers him as Norl declares that the tutorial has started. Leaving Heihachi behind, she charges towards the goblins, cutting through them one after another with ease. She makes sure to leave one goblin for Heihachi as well. The surviving goblin lunges at him, shouting revenge. He panics with no idea what to do. He raises his shield while crying for help, but Norl only stands back and cheers him on. The goblin's strike blows his shield away and lands on his body. However, he feels no pain, leaving both him and the goblin confused. Norl explains that even 10 hits from such a weak monster won't harm him. With a newfound confidence, Heihachi swings his weapon, cutting the monster in half. Norl then announces the tutorial complete and introduces herself properly as Norl Fanya. Heihachi stands stunned, still unable to process what's happening. Frustrated, he pulls her cheeks, making Norl scream in pain. And thus, Heihachi's new life in another world has begun. Heihachi mutters, "Fanya rush," and drags himself forward. He's barely able to walk under the draining weight of his armor. He soon collapses, unable to walk another step. Seeing his pathetic state, they decide to set up camp for the night near the main road. Heihachi uses an item called camping set, which makes a tent appear out of thin air. Norl stares in awe since this is her first time seeing such a thing. She circles the tent in amazement while Heihachi builds a fire outside. The two of them sit together by the flames. Heihachi calls her name, ready with questions he wants answered. He asks what she knows about their situation. Norl explains that this is a different world from where he originally came from, adding that she was summoned to support him. Heihachi asks how she knows he is not from this world. She explains that summoned units receive fragments of their master's memory. He questions again, asking about the time limit on summons. Norl replies that there are no time limits. However, he does have a cost limit which restricts the number of units he can summon at a time. Since she is already present, his current limit is spent. This is the same system as in the game. His current cost limit is 15. However, as he levels up, the cost limit should increase as well. While he is lost in his train of thought, Norl suddenly calls out his name and suggests another option on his phone. When he looks at the screen, he realizes that she is talking about food. Her excitement suddenly shoots up the roof. Heihachi remarks on her energy, making her admit that she loves food. He then triggers the item, and they both wait to see what will appear. Plates of steaming meals appear on the table, and the description notes that any leftovers will turn to ash. They stare at it in silence and then start to eat together across the table. Norl marvels at the taste while Heihachi sits stunned that food from Gacha could be this good. He smiles faintly as Norl overflows with joy at the unexpected feast. Later, they decide to move toward the city in search of somewhere safe. When night falls, Heihachi sleeps inside the tent. Suddenly, Norl crouches near him and wakes him up. He stirs groggily, asking if it is time to change shifts. While he is still confused and half dreaming, she begins to remove her armor. Unfortunately for him, it turns out to be a dream. He wakes up as Norl calls out to him. She tells him about a sound she heard coming from the forest. Elsewhere, a swarm of goblins and orcs are attacking a caravan. The two men hold their weapons against the press of monsters surrounding them. They struggle to hold their ground as the circle tightens. Heihachi and Norl watch quietly from nearby bushes. Seeing the adventurers losing, they decide to help out. Heihachi assigns Norl the larger ones while deciding to handle the goblins himself. She calls out for the adventurers to stand back as she charges and cuts into an orc, severing its arm. At her current state, Norl can only take on 2 orcs at a time. So, she calls out to Heihachi to hurry with the goblins before they get surrounded. Heihachi steadies himself and rushes forward. The goblins slam him with their weapons, but once again he is unharmed. He uses a crowbar to cut through them with ease. The startled travelers watch in shock as enemies fall one after another. The crowbar turned out to be far stronger than he expected. He exhales and finds the fight anticlimactic. Looking over, he sees Norl already standing over the fallen orcs in victory. She prances over, admitting that the orcs were a lot weaker than she thought, and so she gets another cheek pulling. Morning comes and the caravan hits the road again. The owner thanks them for saving them. Once again, Heihachi struggles along, barely managing to walk. He begs Norl to carry him, but she instead drags him forward. The older man chuckles about his sulking while the younger boy points out their arrival at the city of Brunne. The streets of Brunne bustle with life, merchants shouting over one another as travelers weave through the crowd. In the middle of it all, Heihachi and Norl walk side by side, blending into the busy flow. Heihachi quietly counts the coins in his hand, his eyes widening at the reward he received for saving the caravan. The sudden fortune leaves him stunned, but he quickly decides the best use for it is to stay at an inn. At the mention of food, Norl practically bounces with joy, her excitement impossible to contain. They drift through the stalls, exchanging small goods and browsing casually. The smell of roasted meat fills the air, and Norl lingers in front of a vendor, her eyes sparkling at the sight of skewers sizzling over fire. Heihachi, meanwhile, walks half-distracted, scrolling through his phone. His frustration grows as he sees his inventory bare of magic stones and with no clue where to even acquire them. He sighs aloud, wishing he could pull the gacha again. For now, they head toward the inn where the keeper greets them warmly. At the counter, the cost of lodging shocks Heihachi. When he hesitates, the clerk offers a cheaper option, sharing a single room. However, even the thought of that leaves him flustered. He quickly asks for 2 rooms, opting instead to skip out on meals. But that option is completely unacceptable to a food lover like Norl. She insists she would rather share, claiming she wants to stay close to him. Flustered, he fails to argue and ends up requesting a single room. Later that night, he watches her eat with unrestrained delight. As she savors every bite, he scrolls through his phone, pulling up their current stats. Norl's display shows staggering numbers, her equipment granting absurd boosts to her abilities. By comparison, his own status looks pitiful, despite being only one level lower. Heihachi mutters about the unfairness of her ridiculous gear. In contrast, he has a crowbar named Excalibur and a battered pot lid for a shield. Norl points out that Excalibur carries special effects of its own. It glows in battle, however, that's just like putting lipstick on a pig. He longs for proper equipment. When he asks about charging his phone, Norl explains that it restores itself automatically through the world's ambient mana. He then presses her about magic stones and a way home, but she conveniently doesn't know the important stuff. Frustration settles over him as he collapses onto the bed, deciding to sleep it off. Later that evening, Norl also prepares to go to sleep. She takes off her armor and heads to the bath. With only enough coin for one bath, she had asked permission, and Heihachi allowed her without hesitation. The sound of running water reaches him as he sits alone thinking. His thoughts drift toward expenses again, and he grumbles about the cost of bathing. He realizes he needs a steady income before he can even think about returning home. He recalls the advice from the travelers they rescued to register at the Adventurers Guild. Tomorrow, he decides they will go. Norl eventually returns with her hair damp, dressed in night clothes. Heihachi sits frozen in place until she suddenly calls his name. She tilts her head, now wearing a simple mask to cover her face. He sighs, remarking on her effort to remain inconspicuous, but she insists it is natural for a maiden. Once again, her playful nature leaves him conflicted between annoyance and amusement. The next morning, they register at the guild, receiving adventurer licenses marked at the lowest rank. Their cards will change in color as they rise in level. By completing hunts for goblins and orcs, they can earn both coin and experience. Heihachi warns Norl not to lose her license as they leave Brunne and head for the nearby forest. His map marks the area as heavily infested with monsters. Not long into their trek, a goblin spots them. It shrieks, "Human!" before calling more of its kind from the shadows. In moments, they are surrounded. Heihachi freezes while Norl plants her feet firmly, drawing her weapon and shouting for him to stay focused. The battle erupts. Norl's strikes are heavy and precise, cutting down enemies in sweeping arcs. Heihachi fights clumsily but manages to hold his ground. In the chaos, Norl points deeper into the forest. Heihachi follows her gaze and sees a massive figure emerging from between the trees, its dark hide bristling with menace. A black orc. Norl stiffens, recognizing it instantly. Heihachi falters, panic clawing at him. Rare monsters like this are supposed to be terrifying, well beyond his ability. Despite all that buildup, it only takes one strike to decapitate the seemingly fearsome beast. Heihachi stares, dumbfounded, as she lifts the monster meat in triumph and twirls with joy. At the same moment, his phone buzzes. His hand trembles as he checks the screen, his eyes widening when he sees the number of magic stones rising. Rare monsters grant stones. The realization sends a rush of excitement through him. Norl, however, beams simply at the idea of fresh meat. With his mind spinning with new possibilities, Heihachi grips his sword with renewed energy. He rallies beside her, cutting through the goblins with a sudden burst of drive. With his eyes gleaming with magic stones, he tears through the poor creatures. Several days pass in a blur of non-stop hunts. Black orcs fall one after another, and with each battle, magic stones pile up. Heihachi's rank climbs steadily from G to E. Clutching his phone, he trembles with excitement, finally ready to summon again. Norl stands nearby, watching with mild dismay as he raises his arm like a priest about to perform a ritual. Heihachi mutters hopefully, wondering if this time he might finally obtain Luna. However, Norl is there to rain on his parade as always. She explains that ordinary gachas in this world only produce items. To summon actual units requires UR pulls, and even then, there is no guarantee. But there is still hope, since he has enough for one UR pull. He presses the glowing chest on his screen, his heart pounding with conviction. A chest materializes in the air, glowing white. His smile fades. Only SSR. His excitement drains instantly as he pounds the screen in frustration, muttering bitterly that he wanted something better. The thought of buying more gacha pulls crosses his mind before reality hits. Money has no meaning in this world. Norl tries to cheer him up by congratulating him on the SSR, but his mood sinks further when the prize turns out to be nothing more than an Excalibur. The same crowbar he already wields. Just as he despairs, the system prompts him to enhance it. Reluctantly, he agrees, and the weapon glows, its stacked effects making it slightly more practical. Still, he sulks, wishing desperately for a proper UR unit. While digging through his inventory, his eyes fall on something odd. A plushie doll. He recalls its reputation from chat back home. Cute, but utterly worthless. With little else to do, he decides to hand it to Norl as a special gift. She stares at the doll, hesitant at first. He insists that it is cute. After a long pause, she finally nods in reluctant agreement. The next day, they return to the guild and accept an urgent quest. A merchant caravan requires escort through Bistros Forest, notorious for black orc activity. The mission involves guarding a carriage to Rubelk Village, a 2-day journey. Heihachi's eyes gleam at the thought of more magic stones. Before departing, he gathers essentials, a magic bag with infinite storage, and a beacon for returning to marked locations. The quest requires 3 members, so they enlist the help of the man from earlier. Green, a D-rank adventurer, greets them and pledges to rely on their strength. As the group prepares, Heihachi notices Norl holding the plushie doll tightly. A strange thought crosses his mind. Perhaps she actually likes it. Testing a new feature, he opens the status app and scans Green. To his surprise, Green's stats appear lower than expected for his level. Curiosity gets the better of him, and he turns the app toward Norl. In an instant, the screen fills with numbers, her body measurements flashing in detail. Heihachi panics, fumbling to hide the phone as Norl demands to know what he just saw. They continue on with their quest deep into the forest. Suddenly, the ground shakes violently beneath them. The carriage driver screams for them to flee. From the distance, a towering figure emerges. A cyclops, its single eye glaring down like a son of malice. Green shouts in horror, insisting that fighting is madness. The subjugation rank for a cyclops is impossibly high. Heihachi hesitates, checking the monster's stats with his phone. The numbers confirm Green's fears. Its strength and durability are leagues above anything they've faced. He turns to Norl, uncertain, but she nods firmly and declares she has a plan. Trusting her, he nods back while Green yells desperately for them not to be reckless. The Cyclops stomps, the earth cracking beneath its massive foot, sending Heihachi sprawling. Norl darts across the battlefield, weaving between crushing strikes. Energy surges around her as she activates her skill. Inspiration. In an instant, her stats double. Heihachi stares in awe as she rushes forward, sword gleaming, and lands a decisive blow, powerful enough to kill. But the Cyclops refuses to fall. Wounded and staggering, it still clings to life. Heihachi realizes its health must be hanging by a thread. Summoning every ounce of courage, he charges. Excalibur pierces deep into its body, like a splinter in its foot. With a final groan, the beast collapses. Heihachi collapses as well, gasping, declaring their victory. But then the ground shakes once more. To his horror, the Cyclops begins to rise. Finally, with a last rumble, it topples for good, its massive corpse crashing to the ground. Norl rushes to Heihachi's side, kneeling to check on him. He turns his head to respond, lifting a trembling hand toward her. At that moment, her mask slips free for the first time, uncovering her face. Completely. Heihachi freezes, staring at her revealed features in shock. Her eyes widen in panic, her cheeks burning red as she cries out. She screams and bolts away, clutching her head in embarrassment. Heihachi sits frozen, watching her flail and screaming at him not to look. He quickly picks up her helmet and offers it back. She snatches it, hiding her face behind the steel, muttering that she has been seen. She declares she is going home, while Heihachi fumbles an apology. Moments later, Norl crouches down in pain, clutching her body. Heihachi kneels at her side. She screams out in pain as he touches her. He wonders perhaps it could be the drawback of her skill. Even so, he urges her to move so they can get back to the caravan. Later, Green and the other man sit by the fire outside, while Norl lies weak and pale. Heihachi tells her to rest. As he steps away, guilt weighs on him, and he whispers that this is his fault. However, Norl assures him that it wasn't. He hesitates, then asks why she hides her face so much. She admits that whenever her face is exposed, she freezes, losing her strength. Even her voice must be controlled to sound like a knight. Heihachi breaks into a nervous sweat when she adds that it is fine if only he sees her face. Stammering, she admits that someone like her must look strange. The words tumble out of Heihachi's mouth before he can stop them. He was surprised, but thought her face was cute. The compliment stuns her into silence. Heihachi immediately panics, realizing what he said. Then, without warning, Norl leaps onto him, declaring that she will follow him forever. The impact makes her wince in pain, and he urges her to calm down. By the next day, Norl has fully recovered. Their group continues the journey and completes their quest, arriving at Rubelk village. Just as they settle, Heihachi suddenly notices a flashing notification. His voice rises in alarm, insisting they must return to Brunne at once. Norl and Green stare at him in confusion, but his urgency leaves no room for argument. Back at the inn, Heihachi calls for a strategy meeting. Norl sits across from him, confused as he proudly shows his phone. A campaign banner glows on the screen, but she reacts with little interest. Heihachi nearly shouts that it doubles the chance of summoning UR units. Waving his hand wildly, he explains the time limit and the odds. Just 2%. His plan is simple yet insane. They must gather 50 magic stones a day. Norl's jaw drops upon hearing this. She protests that they usually earn only 5 stones in a single day. Heihachi only leans closer, grinning with determination, proclaiming his unbeatable plan. Her doubts die in her throat as she gulps nervously. The next day, they go deeper in the forest, beyond their usual hunting grounds. A vortex shimmers in the air, monsters pouring out. Heihachi explains spawn point mechanics, outlining his idea. They will camp near these points to rack up kills before moving on. He pulls up a map app on his phone to show the locations, and Norl stares at his confidence with a mix of awe and exhaustion. Battle after battle follows. Norl pants heavily, leaning on her sword, drenched in sweat. Heihachi begs her to keep going, promising he'll do anything. She agrees, and the marathon continues. Day after day they fight orcs, gather stones, eat quickly, then rest. Norl cuts through enemy waves while Heihachi directs their pace, the cycle repeating as stones pile up. By the 5th and 6th days, fatigue sinks deep into their bodies. Norl still fights, but her swings slow, her movements sluggish even during meals. On the 7th day, she finally breaks. She bursts forward with renewed energy, humming as she slashes through orcs, her spirit blazing again. On the 8th day, her attitude completely changes. She mutters about orcs being late, her eyes sharp, her tone feverish. Heihachi watches helplessly, unsure how to answer. Back in town, the strain explodes. Norl brandishes her sword in the streets, mistaking people for orcs. Heihachi panics, restraining her as onlookers stare. She screams about destroying orcs until exhaustion overwhelms her. He drags her back to the inn, where she collapses onto the bed, mumbling about killing orcs even in her dreams. Heihachi sits beside her, worry gnawing at him. On his phone, the numbers glare back at him. 395 stones collected. 2 days remain, and 105 are still needed. Doubt presses hard against his chest. Clutching his phone, he wonders if they can really finish this. With only 2 days left before the deadline, Heihachi tightens his grip on his weapon, ready to go into battle. Norl quietly asks if the plan has changed. He explains that since this is the second to last day, he will join the hunt himself. To ease her burden, he suggests they split into different zones. Norl hesitates, uncertainty flickering in her eyes, but when she sees him clench his fist with determination, she finally nods. Heihachi trembles as he steps into the forest alone, weapon clutched tightly in hand. Growls echo through the trees, and his breath catches as a massive beast bursts out of the undergrowth. He stumbles back, heart pounding, then steadies himself as the monster swings down. With a desperate roar, he leaps forward, his strike colliding against its overwhelming strength. By the final day, his body is battered and bruised. He slumps against a tree, chest heaving, while Norl staggers to his side, her armor rattling with exhaustion. Yet both raise their voices together in ragged relief as they celebrate reaching the 500-stone mark at last. That night, Heihachi lifts his phone high, excitement trembling in his voice as he declares the long-awaited carnival open. Norl sits on the bed with an exasperated sigh at his obsession. He waves her off, saying he cannot wait to see his new unit, and taps the summon button. The first draw flops. Norl blinks in disbelief, but Heihachi reassures her there are still plenty of chances. The second and third attempts gleam with SSR results, igniting fresh hope. He grins, declaring that a UR must be close. But the fourth pull lands only an SR. He clenches his teeth, insisting it is still within expectations. The 5th, 6th, and 7th pulls all return SRS as well. His optimism falters, but he refuses to stop. Norl urges him to take a break, yet he grips the phone tighter, sweat beading on his brow. After another SR, his voice cracks as he finally admits defeat. His determination begins to falter. With only 2 tries left, he mutters a desperate prayer for at least 1 UR and slams his finger down. Another SR flashes across the screen. Rage bursts out of him as he screams that the doubled rates are lies. Norl steps close, smiling gently despite his despair. She tells him she is rooting for him. Her words steady him, reminding him of the 10 days of struggle, her support, and their shared effort. He declares he must pull through for both of them. The final chest bursts open. Cards spill out, but his hope crumbles as yet another worthless result fills the screen. He screams to the heavens, tears streaking his face. Collapsing onto the floor, he begs for his magic stones back. Norl kneels beside him, patting his back and softly promising they will succeed next time. Then she notices a few leftover stones. Tilting her head, she asks if she may try. Heihachi, broken and hollow, nods. He hands her the phone. Norl takes it eagerly, her eyes alight. Heihachi sits in silence, reflecting on the past days. He remembers the joy of smaller victories, the laughter they shared, and realizes how blinded he became chasing only magic stones. Suddenly, Norl gasps. Her voice rises in disbelief as she shouts that a UR has appeared. She holds the screen high. Heihachi spins around, eyes wide in shock, and snatches the phone. The image of a new girl beams from the display. Overcome with relief, he bursts into tears and clings to Norl. On the screen shines the name of the UR unit, Estelle. Later that day, Heihachi stands in the middle of the forest, wondering what to do. His thumb hovers over the summon button. He scrolls through Estelle's profile, reading her strength and stats, wondering about the personality behind them. Norl urges him on with quiet encouragement. Finally, he presses the screen. Light bursts outward, a summoning circle spreading beneath them. Heihachi mutters a quiet apology for everything as Norl watches at his side. From the glow, a figure emerges, staff in hand, Estelle calm and composed. She steps forward, eyes locking onto Heihachi. Her first words make his heart skip. She asks if he is the one who summoned her. He stammers out his name in reply while Norl stiffly introduces herself. He flinches again when Estelle skips her own introduction, claiming he already knows. Bewildered, he shrugs and asks if she will join them. Estelle tilts her head, lips curling into a smirk, and asks what benefits there are in following him. Heihachi freezes. Determined not to falter, he blurts out a request for her help in monster hunting. She laughs lightly, confessing she was only joking. Then, with a playful smile, she declares he seems interesting and agrees to join. Thus, a second companion has joined the party. The Gacha campaign announcement still lingers in Heihachi's mind as he and Norl return from the long hunt. At the end, the receptionist greets them. Heihachi clears his throat and introduces Estelle as their newest party member. Calm and composed, staff in hand, she steps forward with a gentle smile. Their second UR character, a magician now joining his party. At reception, Estelle casually remarks that she is fine sharing the same room. Heihachi nearly chokes, flustered, and insists on separate rooms. Norl sides with Estelle, pointing out that it would be unfair if he gets one alone. With a sly tilt of her head, Estelle requests a 3-person room instead. Heihachi's imagination runs wild with embarrassment as his face turns red. Leaning close, Estelle asks if the idea bothers him. Her teasing glance makes him stammer that he has no objections. Smirking, she warns that he will regret worrying about summoning her, then walks off with Norl, leaving him speechless in the hall. Later that evening, Estelle sits behind Norl, humming softly as she plays with her hair. She ties it into uneven pigtails while Norl protests in embarrassment. Estelle suggests removing the mask as well, but Norl quickly refuses. Heihachi watches from the side, oddly relieved, then pulls out his phone to check Estelle's stats. Her profile shows strong magic power, but noticeably low defense. He muses aloud that his earlier worries may have been misplaced. The scan continues. Her UR equipment, enchanted robes, and staff offer massive boosts. Then, without warning, her body measurements flash on screen. Heihachi freezes in place, eyes wide. Estelle notices instantly. She rises, steps toward him, and demands to know what he is looking at. Panicked, Heihachi shoves the phone behind his back, stammering about checking her equipment only. Estelle narrows her eyes, leaning close until his forehead drips with sweat. Then, just as suddenly, she backs away, her expression smooth as if nothing happened, leaving him dizzy with relief and confusion. Before he can recover, she throws her arms around him, pressing her face against his chest. Heihachi yelps in shock as she teases him with compliments about his build, her hands wandering in ways that make him panic. She leans in close, whispering if he has any complaints. Norl steps forward with a smirk, joining in the teasing, saying it's payback for when he failed to support her earlier. Sandwiched between them, Heihachi flails helplessly, begging for mercy. The next morning, he trudges through town with dark circles under his eyes. Estelle calls out cheerfully while he mutters about losing sleep after the chaos of last night. Shaking off his weariness, he decides their first stop should be the Adventurers Guild to register Estelle. Inside, chatter fills the hall. Curious stares follow as they approach the counter. Heihachi requests Estelle's registration, and the receptionist freezes for a moment before hurrying to fetch the forms. Norl tilts her head asking why, and the receptionist admits it is her first time meeting a magician. Most magicians, she explains, are drafted straight into the Royal Army's casting division. Heihachi blinks in surprise. Magicians are not only rare but also highly ranked, making Estelle's presence draw even more attention. As Estelle fills out the paperwork, whispers ripple through the hall. The receptionist hands her a new nameplate, its color marking her starting G rank. She inspects it with curiosity while Heihachi proudly displays his E rank for comparison. Estelle frowns and asks to be bumped up immediately. The receptionist apologizes, saying it isn't possible. Estelle pouts, and the adventurers nearby glare daggers at Heihachi, muttering that he must have offended her. Flustered, he scrambles to fix the mood as the murmurs grow louder, with some insisting he take responsibility. Finally, he declares that he will help Estelle level up. Estelle beams with determination, her eyes sparkling as she announces she will blow everything up on her way to E rank. Her cheerful conviction makes Heihachi uneasy, while Norl notes just how serious she looks. They remind her she must reach F rank first before advancing to E. Later, Heihachi appears in new equipment, flashy armor and a pair of sleek glasses from Gacha Rewards. Though self-conscious about his look, he insists that stats matter most. Both Norl and Estelle glance at him, commenting that he feels different now, especially with the glasses. Through them, Heihachi can see their detailed stats. He tests them, scanning Norl and Estelle. Estelle quickly notices his gaze and narrows her eyes suspiciously, but he laughs it off awkwardly. Norl interrupts by asking about magic. Curious, and Heihachi too wants to see Estelle's true strength. Before long, a horde of orcs and goblins charges toward them. Estelle steps forward calmly, her staff glowing faintly. With a confident smile, she promises to demonstrate.
Here I am, know it's been a while. I was in denial about my love.